All right. Greetings, brothers and sisters. Tonight or today is June 15th, 2024, 3:07 p.m. This is um, session two of our summer school, going over a course of African philosophy, Message to the People by Honorable Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. um, we'll do our introduction and then we'll begin. First thing first, we'll do our. I'm not gonna do our pledge. Don't worry about the pledge. We will do. I'm gonna do our rituals. Okay. First opening hymn is from Greenland's Icy Mountains. And if I didn't mention, my name is Brother John Hargrove. I serve as a president for Division 421 Atlanta of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Opening hymn from Greenland's Icy Mountain. From Greenland's Icy Mountains, from India's coral strand, where Africa's sunny fountains roll down their golden sand. And from many ancient rivers, from many palmy plains, they called us to deliver their land from error's chain. Shall we whose souls are lighted from wisdom with wisdom from on high, shall we to men be knighted, the lamp of life deny? Salvation, O salvation, the joyful sound proclaim, till earth's remotest nation has learned Messiah's name. Waft, waft, ye winds, his story, till you, ye waters, roll, till like a sea of glory, it spreads from pole to pole. Till o'er our ransomed nation, the Lamb for sinners slain, the Redeemer, King, Creator, in bliss returns to reign. Amen. Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. And lastly, shine on eternal light. Shine on eternal light to greet our souls this day, dispel the gloominess of night, and drive our doubts away. Our longing eye prepare when war and strife shall cease, to view the morn soon to appear, the new era of peace. Thy glorious church, O God, no kingdom can remove, made without hands, this blessed abode, the harbinger of love. Of all the gifts that flow from thy great throne above, we ask thee on our hearts bestow the gift of perfect love. My soul the light receives and dares the truth to prove, not in blind ignorance believes, but knows that God is love. Come, love, and give new birth to man's destructive mind, spread where confusion reigns on earth, goodwill to all mankind. Shine on, eternal light, thy penetrating ray shall turn the hour of darkest night into eternal day. Amen. Let's take care of our openings. Um, so we're here tonight discussing a course of African philosophy as taught by the Right Excellent Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. It's his second session. Last session, we were trying to go over Mr. Garvey's last 4 years or last 3.5 years from 1936 up until 1940. And looking at some of the documentation as to what he was doing and what his plans were, what he was trying to accomplish at the end of his life. Some of the things that we talked about was how Mr. Garvey talked about new program, new UNIA, and the UNIA entering its second phase. And that was in 1937. And we should also know that course of African philosophy was originally taught first in 1937. So that time of 1937, when Mr. Garvey is turning 50 years old, that is the beginning of the second age of what Mr. Garvey was trying to create in regards to the UNIA. Quickly, before we go into the course of African philosophy, one second. We'll look at the official minutes of the first Ohio State caucus. I thought this was the official minutes of the convention, but we'll get to that. But a couple things here. This is from meeting was called at 12:30. State Commissioner J.R. Stewart. We should know who James Stewart is. We should know James Stewart. We should know Charles L. James. We should know Thomas W. Harvey. And as of last week, we talked about Sister Ethel Collins, who served as the Secretary General at the time of Mr. Garvey's last few years. One thing that James R. Stewart said at this meeting, so this is what time of year? April 1938. Charles L. James says that I believe that because of my graduation from the African School of Philosophy, I am in the position to know how to conduct the affairs of the association with your cooperation in a manner suitable to the President General. So after the first year, 1937, of teaching, James R. Stewart was one of the first graduates. So he's coming back 1938 and basically announcing to the public, now that he's graduated, he feels that he has the direction that Mr. Garvey would be proud of. And again, Mr. Garvey is still alive at this time. Raise the standard of the organization from ignorance to intelligence. Ignorance does not mean a lack of knowledge of education, but the lack of common sense. We should know, and we'll talk about that, but everybody, you brothers here, Mr. Garvey's quote, intelligence rules the world and ignorance carries the burden. That's a major, ignorance and intelligence is a major component of the course of African philosophy. There are books to read, and we have enough literature in the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey to read for the next 100 years. When you show ignorance, you as leaders should realize that you place yourselves in a very embarrassing position when you show ignorance. So again, this is Brother Charles L. James speaking to the public and speaking in a new tone as he has become aware of some new knowledge and a new perspective on how to view leadership. Learn to be guided by the Constitution. Don't be guided by the program of the former organizations of which you are a member, because the UNIA has the original philosophy of its own. Constitution, Universal Negro Improvement Association has a constitution of its own. So study a constitution as well as the philosophy and opinions of the association, so you will know the correct manner in which to conduct the affairs of the organization. So as leaders, we have to know the correct manner in which to do things. We don't, just because we are elected, doesn't mean that everything that we think is the right thing is the actual right thing. Due to our lack of knowledge of the correct function of the divisions, most of our disagreements or disputes in our divisions are due to our lack of knowledge of the correct function of the division. So study and always be ready to counsel with those less enlightened than ourselves. So when we talk about disagreements and disputes within our divisions, which is something that all divisions still have an issue with today. But according to Brother James R. Stewart, this is due to a misunderstanding of how our body should function, and to know that he just mentioned Constitution, and we would also say our bylaws. So before we do anything else, we should know our Constitution. We should know our bylaws. Cease to carry a frown as though we are angry with the world. Carry a smile, pleasant greeting. So students, we've all gone through this. We know how Mr. Garvey talks about approaching the world with kindness, winning the world with kindness, smiling, having a level of diplomacy. But this letter is kind of exemplifying a lot of the teachings that James R. Stewart acquired through the course of African philosophy. We want courteous people in our division. People who make friends with the public and with the children of the public and have the children say, I like Mr. So-and-so of the UNI because he gave me a sucker, a penny, etc. Course of African Philosophy talks about winning the support of parents by doing good things for the children. And that's exactly what James R. Stewart is mentioning there. Stop worrying about conditions, as conditions are the same throughout the state. So everywhere, throughout Georgia, it's the same as it is in Atlanta. The struggles are the same. In that we are living upon the charity of others. So just like we need here and we need in our city, our people in other states and across the state are in the same condition. We will solve the problems in our communities. We are in need of manpower, so stop putting members out. That was more so for our leadership group. We don't have that issue, but this is something that James R. Stewart mentioned specifically in 1938. I guess they were having an issue of putting members out for whatever reason. We still have that today, but we should not be putting members out. But under the Constitution, try to satisfy them and keep them. So we're trying to grow the organization. We're not trying to thin it out. Diplomatic approach. Let us understand and appreciate what is meant by diplomatic approach. It is a method by which a man gets from another something that he desires for himself without losing friendship of that individual. So understanding diplomacy. We as leaders, we must understand diplomacy and we must function diplomatically. You as leaders in your divisions are to work with all and not individuals, and at times be with the you as leaders in your divisions are to work with all and not individuals, and at times be with the majority as long as they are within the constitution of the organization. So it's not about our personal opinions. It's about the decisions of the body. As we come together, we put things on the table and we make a decision as a body, whether we agree with it or not. We submit to the decision of the body. Get all you can in donations to the UNIA because of its charitable work in the community, clothing for a bazaar, food for the needy, etc., and at all times from the other man, but do so in a diplomatic way. Then the preamble, purpose of the preamble, how it should be used when the existence of the organization is threatened in the community. I'll probably share the preamble before we get off. Program of the UNIA would be instilled further into the minds of the oncoming generations. So that was the plan, was to instill a new mindset into the minds of the oncoming generations. I'm going to skip down to the convention minutes. Official minutes of the 8th International UNIA Convention, August 1938. Honorable Marcus Garvey was in attendance, in which he timely appointed Miss Ethel Waddell. We should know that name, Ethel Waddell of Chicago. She was also in the first class, to my knowledge. Miss Ethel Collins was also in the first class. Miss Eleanor White was also in the first class. But all of these individuals were in positions of leadership in the 1937 as well as 1938 conventions. This convention gave an aspect of being one of the most outstanding of the conventions of the association in matter of accomplishment. It was not the character of the other, it was not the character of the other conventions and the attendance of extraordinary numbers of people and demonstrations, but it was held at a time when the economic conditions had borne severely upon the race. So again, as the Course of African Philosophy teaches, it was written at a time where Mr. Garvey had an unfortunate hindsight, but he was able to look back. This is not young Mr. Garvey. This is not when we had our millions of dollars in ships and several businesses. This is after all of that happened, and we don't have the numbers that we have, and we are recovering economically. But our ancestors still felt that this was an outstanding convention based on its accomplishments. President General, when welcomed the delegates of the convention, he said that the UNIA has had a difficult task during the last 4 years due to bad economic conditions. I think that's something that we can relate to. But again, Mr. Garvey teaches us we have to go to the history and learn what we did in history and how we overcame, or at least what our strategies were in history. Because if we don't know history, we're doomed to repeat it. For the simple reason that we are so considering our financial position and how difficult it is for us to approach the people and say the things we want, say the things we want to them, for the simple principle that we are so disorganized. You will understand that our program is very, very difficult. So our program is difficult. We were in a serious position of disorganization. The Negro has the greatest opportunity when this Negro had the greatest opportunity when this Liberian program was launched. So he's talking about our missed opportunities in the past. He had intelligence, he had money, he had everything, but he did not take hold of this opportunity. So when we talk about, us as Americans, Black Americans, if you want to call it that, or us in this land, we are the most educated, the most financed, the most well-armed. So those conditions still exist. But the question is, will we take advantage of the opportunity that we have, and how will we take advantage of that opportunity? The Negro does not seem to realize that he is on his own responsibility. Self-reliance, lesson 14. What the Negro needs is action, cooperative action. And not until you give that cooperative action can the program be put over. Again, I am warning you that the program at present is difficult to put over. So again, it's the second time Mr. Garvey stressed the difficulty of this program. In regards to communism is not for the purpose of advancing the Negro of the United States. That was something that had come up during the convention. He was kind of trying to just, end that really quick. We'll have to talk about it. It was never intended for the Negro. So we should know, as students, of course, of African philosophy, Mr. Garvey's opinion on communism, and who it was made by and who it was made for. Every race that does not think is ultimately doomed to the position adopted for them by the thinkers of the world. The trouble with the Negro is that he does not think. Miss Eleanor White, Chicago, talked on the conditions of the people in Illinois, mentioning various groups in which people were divided. Mrs. White spoke of the church as being the biggest hindrance to the organization in the state of Illinois. Who wrote this? This has to be Sister Eleanor White. I have gone into the churches, but I've received more insults from them than from anywhere else because the Negroes are interested in nothing but the church and Jesus. So if we don't get a lot of support from the church, we should not be surprised. And speaking of the youth of the race, Mrs. White said, you will find that the young people are interested only in fine clothes, theater, and dance halls, and we must get those things if we want the young people in the UNIA. Sounds very familiar. We have to tap into the things that young people want, acquire those things to attract the young people, is Mrs. White's sentiment. We must map out ways and means of getting money because holding meetings will not get it. Does that sound familiar? Have we had that position or opinion as of recently? If we raise our children with universal thought when they are further in life, it will be hard to sway them away. Proverbs 22:6. Let me jump to that really quick, and we'll be getting some scripture throughout these lessons.
Train up a child in the way that he's go when he always wants to part from it. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. But we'll see.
Yes, you're right. Excellent, Brother Macy's. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So that is essentially what is being said in that portion of the message. Thank you, Brother Macy's. Benjamin Jones, Philadelphia, spoke of the economic conditions of the race, and 9/10 of the Negroes in America on relief. So our people need finances. Mr. William Thornton said trouble with UNIA among ourselves as members is among ourselves as members. We are not organized. Mr. Thornton was primarily interested in the military department, suggested that young boys and girls put on uniforms. Ms. Carmen said, we have organized street speaking to review, they think, renew the spirit of the organization and publicity. The biggest problem is unemployment, and we should see that aid is given to our people. So we were in a financial crisis, our people and our government. Mr. Alfonso Joseph advised Negroes to follow the example of the Jew, and that the Jew acquired education of every race and nation, but always keep his own morals and culture. Course of African philosophy. Mr. Garvey now speaks. He says, I shall undertake to review these things you have said and to advise you, so that those of you who have made mistakes, those of you who have misinterpreted the aims and objects of the association may be completely informed, so that you may, when this convention ends, be of the same mind. So that's one of the goals we have to, and as leaders, as you know, we have to be of the same mind, be of the same mode, of the same action as those delegates who have the spirit adopted towards the organization. The aims and objects, and particularly the ideals of the UNIA, have but one way through which we must express them. So according to Mr. Garvey, there's only one way to express the aims and ideals of the UNIA. The UNIA, unfortunately, has not been able in its 23 years of existence to establish a school until the last conference we held in Toronto at Community Hall. So he's talking about last year would have been 1937. But he's alluding to this being part of this long solution that he's looked for. Out of the 5 years of planning, we have started the School of African Philosophy. It is beginning right here in this hall. I spent the whole month of September with the delegates who remained behind and graduated them for the work. They were appointed over the different fields, and from your presence here, I feel they have helped much. Whenever another organization comes before you, you must put it under close scrutiny to find out where it got its charter from. Where did it get its ideals from, and where it got its constitution from, and what it intends to do. The UNIA put through this test is monumental because its founder is Black and its program is one that is to bring freedom and happiness to the Black race of people. Mr. Garvey said that he hoped we would always have somebody who would always have the state of mind to best instruct, and that we had taken our views into subject forms and would discuss them likewise. So we'll have the state of mind to best instruct, and that we have taken our views in the subject form and would discuss them likewise. And briefly, and then I'll get into the text. Jealousy, Mr. Garvey says, jealousy we will always have. So organize ourselves to select the one program that appeals to each and every one of us. Jealousy must not be considered as interfering with the progress of the organization. So jealousy is going to be there. It is no excuse. We must proceed. His absolute duty is himself. Is this responsibility? Influence attitudes of the Jew. So talking about the Jew, how the Jew is only responsible to himself, only responsible to his race, and how we should adopt similar principles. In regards to the churches, let the churches alone, let them rise or die by themselves. So Mr. Garvey is responding to the sister mentioning about the churches. In regards to bad leaders, you have bad leaders because they do not know better. 1937, Mr. Garvey said to Honorable Charles L. James, you do not know because, and I know you don't know because I haven't taught you. So part of the School of African Philosophy was to ensure that we had good leaders, and we were sure that they were good leaders because Mr. Garvey made sure that they had the knowledge. Some fellows who are leading and who have led have never taken time to dig into the principles and get sufficient information to properly acquaint themselves with the program. Do not accept people who come in the interest of the organization, that interest of an organization that you know nothing about. They come for their gain, and afterwards you are lost. You who do know must fight for the right and stay and see that it is done. Anyone coming to you without credentials of the UNIA must not be accepted because the results will be mournful. And we talked about the credentials that was established in 1937. My understanding, these credentials are related to graduation in the course of African philosophy. Difficulties of our race, don't be surprised, it's something that we should expect. Economics, um, this is kind of vague, but Mr. Garvey, this is what I got. Until you can understand the unwritten law, you're at the mercy of those around you. The unwritten law is the most serious law of all. Kind of vague. I don't really, nothing to really discuss there. Presidents who have no confidence in the UNIA. Until a man has been trained, he is not expected to do things perfect in the interests of the organization. To do that, we have established an African school of philosophy. So 1938, 2 years prior to Mr. Garvey's transition, you can see the importance that he has placed on the School of African Philosophy. Utility, this is where he's talking about the utility of our legion and saying that the legion's not as important. I am saying to you that the legion is and their usefulness has long come to a close, and we have been carrying on for these years without. So it's been several years we haven't had a legion. There was a time when they were of vital use to us, but the entire race has allowed that chance to pass. So we had our moment, is what Mr. Garvey says. We missed that window. The uniform is a threat and a dangerous one. The government's eyes are on you. Your difficulty today is more economical than military. So that's to our Legion brothers and sisters. We will develop a Legion, but Mr. Garvey in 1938 felt that our economic condition was more important than our military condition. Crookedness, as far as the UNIA is concerned, is absolutely essential that any man who is to stand as a living example must be a man who has grasped the fullest ideals of the association. Don't assume that anyone is dishonest until you have proved their dishonesty, then let him not lead you. The morals of young people. So in regards to young people, sister said we need to bring in young people. We got to attract the young people. The morals of our young people are very loose. It is the fault of our environment and the present state of our affairs. They are suffering from something which they never created. The general approach is through our young women. Another reason is that the young people are not encouraged to join helpful youth movements among themselves. You will find among the young people a certain percentage of their youth who are as thoughtful as the eldest of their race because they are influenced by their elders. 51% of our women in certain sections of the world are supporting their men. The advice of the UNIA in handling that can only be based on economic security, which we do not have. Occupation will prevent and remedy this. Try to do what you can to make it safe for your existence. In your efforts, seek always to make it interesting for the youth to help themselves. So not a direct, solution, but some things for us to consider. So August 5th, 1938, Mr. Garvey again. 4 years ago, we were in a very difficult position financially. The first convention after my deportation. So 1934 was the first convention that the UNIA had after Mr. Garvey's deportation. And as we read, this was the 8th international convention. So we didn't have a convention every single year. We had them consecutively for a little while. Obviously, Mr. Garvey is incarcerated. He's exiled. And in 1934, we're able to begin to pick up that regularity. Those officers who returned to America sent me no financial support, and so the burden was placed on me at the expense of myself and even to my personal property. So that's for us as officers. We need to make sure we are filling out our reports and submitting our reports on time. Okay, and that's all I've got for the UNIA papers. I will jump over to course of African philosophy at this time. Please hold your questions if you can. This is more of a presentation than a conversation, or in September it'll be more involved. You'll be more of a dialogue, but for the time's sake, for what I'm trying to present, please hold your questions to the end and just allow me to kind of go through it. Okay. So, as we should all know, the tone that we're discussing at the end of Mr. Garvey's life, and from what I've seen, is twofold. One is, leadership, our manpower. We need to have the best leaders in place, and leaders that, as Mr. Garvey says, understands the program and the ideals of the association. So good leaders is number one, and number two is finances. We need to improve our finances. And the answer to those two questions that Mr. Garvey gives is Course of African Philosophy to address leadership, and the 5-year plan to address finances. And for these 3 weeks, we'll go over the Course of African Philosophy. I have chosen to exclude the 5-year plan. It is lesson 22 in the Course of African Philosophy. You can read it yourself. But for the summer course, I don't feel that the 5-year plan is critical. The first 21 lessons will keep you busy up until we go through this course in September. So Course of African, or 5-year plan won't be presented. So first thing first, with the School of African Philosophy, there's an oath that each of the students were required to take. And I will read that oath. It says, I, Brother John Hargrove, do solemnly swear before Almighty God that I have entered upon the instruction of the African School of Philosophy, conducted by Marcus Garvey, for no other purpose than to serve the Negro race through the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, of which he is the President General, and that I shall not use the knowledge so gained to promote or advance the interests of any other organization. I shall confine myself always to the service of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and work within the framework of the organization for any promotion I may desire for the improvement of my race. I shall never divulge or reveal any of these lessons I receive to anyone, and shall never allow the lessons or records thereof to fall into the hands of anyone, and shall safeguard the same with my life from falling into the hands of other races. I shall always use my energy and ability to advance the interests of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and shall never be in rebellion against it. And to this I swear myself, my honor, my sacred trust. And should I fail this oath, may the just reward be meted out to me. So help me God. The oath is, the preservation of the oath is credited to go to Sister Eleanor White, who we've been talking about. We mentioned her a few times. But she gave this oath September 23rd, 1927. That is the date of the graduation of the first class. One thing that's important, or that is important to some, we'll get into this as we go into the introduction, is the lineage of the course. And as we go through the course, we should understand our lineage to the course. And as we, grow and to start teaching others, you want to be able, you will be able to tell them your lineage directly back to Mr. Garvey. Mr. Garvey taught the course first 1937. There were 11 students and 10 graduates. Of those 10 graduates, 3 of them went on to become President Generals: James R. Stewart, Charles L. James, and Thomas W. Harvey. To our knowledge, the previous President General, the 10th President General, the ninth successor and the 10th President General, Brother Senghor Baye, he took the course of African philosophy under Thomas W. Harvey and Charles L. James sometime in the 1970s. He went on to become President General in 2008. 2009, he established the Atlanta division, and President Ross Marvin took the course of African philosophy under Senghor Baye in 2009. 2019, President Ross Marvin taught the course to myself as well as other division members in attendance at that time. And anyone that takes the course from me, obviously, whenever you take it, you become a part of this lineage. But one of the things that's important for graduates and students is to be able to trace your lineage back to Mr. Garvey, and we'll explain why in just a few slides. So this is in the book of the course of African philosophy. It's just a picture of some of the graduates, not all of them. This is 8 of the 10 graduates. Charles L. James, Sarah Isaacs, Teresa Young, Ethel Waddell, Eleanor White, James R. Stewart, Nathaniel Grisham, and Thomas W. Harvey. All these names very important. Very important. The 3 most important, probably Charles L. James, James R. Stewart, and Thomas W. Harvey, just for the simple fact that they went on to become president generals. Okay. Now, so this is where we start to get into the text and some of the things that the text will explain to us and let us know. Brother Omasius, if you or somebody got a Bible, I may need to call on some scriptures. If somebody could have some scriptures pulled up and have them ready, that would be helpful, or I could just swap back and forth. But if somebody could pull up Matthew 22-29 and let us know what that says. If not, I'm gonna pull it up. I think this is the many are called, few chosen type thing. What? 22.
Matthew 22:29. Jesus replied, "Your mistake is that you don't know the scriptures and you don't know the power of God."
Yes.
And Jesus replied, "Your mistake is that you don't know the scriptures and you don't know the power of God."
Thank you. Yes. So it's about not knowing certain things, not knowing our potential to an extent. How many aims and objects are there in the UNIA? Do we know? We should know.
11. I mean 10 according to our current constitution, but 11.
Absolutely. Originally there were 11. Currently we have 10. And we'll go into each of those in lesson 3, but the course of African philosophy comes from our 11 aims and objectives. What members of the UNIA was the course of African philosophy created for? Do we remember?
Those who seek leadership.
Yes.
Officers.
Leaders to carry on the work of the organization after Garvey's death. And again, I'll have a more thorough explanation when we actually go through the class. This is just a recap and a kind of a teaser for what to expect in the fall course. What year was the first School of African Philosophy taught? We just mentioned this.
1937.
1937, absolutely. How many students were in the first class? I said this, it was 11 students in the first class, 10 graduated. The point there is not everybody, this wasn't 100% graduation rate. And some of us may not complete it on the first go round, but that's okay. How many students of the first class went on to become president generals? We mentioned that here. 3 students in the first class went on to become president generals, but reinforcing the importance of this course. Brother Mason, if you could have Matthew 22:14 ready. Name of the students who became president generals. We just said that. Charles L. James, James R. Stewart, Thomas W. Harvey, in the course. And I've got John 15:20. It's got to be. So the best.
If you are chosen.
What was John 15:20? What you got? What kind of you?
I'm sorry, I did Matthew 22:14.
Hold off on Matthew. Give me John 22. John 15:20. John 15:20 says, remember the word I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they have kept my sayings, they will keep yours also. So this is about acknowledging chain of command in the source. Number 9 said, why was the best student hesitant to enroll in the course? When you read the text, you will find that Charles L. James was credited as being the best student in the course, but he had an ego and he felt that Mr. Garvey's time would be better served with someone else. And we have to also consider, if that had been done, where would we be right now? Charles L. James is the reason why we have the text. He's a major reason why we still have the text. If we are to preserve information for the next generation, we have to make sure we humble ourselves and make sure we're getting information from the source or as close to the source as possible. But don't be egotistical, because it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts future generations. Schedule of the courses taught by Garvey. So there were 2 courses that he taught, 1937, 1938. In 1937, they met for a month, and they had sessions from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 12-hour sessions. And they basically did everything together. But that sacrifice that they had to make in order to be able to put a 6 months training into a 30-day course, that's something we have to consider. 1937 course was a 6-month correspondence course that Mr. Garvey gave from his London headquarters. So when we look at the classes of the 37 and the 38, we should understand, the evolution of Mr. Garvey's presentation. But he talked about that in 1937 as well. Who was appointed the authentic historian of the life and works of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, and who appointed him? Anyone want to answer that?
It was Dr. Tony Martin was appointed. Dr. Tony Martin was appointed the historian by Charles L. James.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Tony Martin was appointed by Charles L. James. Charles L. James was the President General at the time, and they were trying to preserve the authentic history of the organization. So he appointed Dr. Tony Martin to edit Course of African Philosophy. But if you look at the text, even though it was published in 1985 or 1986, which is 46 years after Mr. Garvey's death, Mr. Garvey is still credited with authorship of that text. So Mr. Garvey is the author, Dr. Tony Martin is the editor, and Honorable Charles L. James approved for this text to be published. And Brother Mason, what was Matthew 22:14?
Give me a call if you are chosen.
Ah, yes. That's the one I like. And I didn't know I had y'all on the Bible thing the whole time. 22:14. For many are called, but few are chosen. I think I've heard the labor is plenty, or the harvest is plenty, and the laborers are few. But one thing to consider after Mr. Garvey's great legacy and career as an organizer, it came down to 17 individuals. So there were only 17 individuals that were qualified to carry on the work of the organization as instructed by Mr. Garvey. But we should be we should want to be of that few group. All right, I got to keep moving. We're almost an hour in, and we ain't even gotten lesson one. We're gonna run through this. What compilation of work is considered the closest thing to a book that Marcus Garvey ever wrote? And the answer to that question is Message to the People, The Course of African Philosophy. Of all the literature, of all the text and videos and speeches that we have of Mr. Garvey, the closest thing to a book that he wrote himself with his own hands is Message to the People, Course of African Philosophy. So when it comes to Garveyism, the philosophies and opinions of Garveyism, what Mr. Garvey thought, what he said, this is the only text that is a compilation of his that he compiled himself. Philosophies and Opinions and Selected Writings and Speeches, that is Mr. Garvey's work, that is his words. But these are texts, Philosophy and Opinions is something he approved. I think Selected Writings and Speeches came after his death. But as far as something that he sat down from beginning to end, created as one complete text in a specific time period, Message to the People, Course of African Philosophy is the only thing that fits that criteria. So that is why this text is so important and should be so important in our organization. This is the only thing that is the direct word of Mr. Garvey himself. He in this text, he directs us to the Constitution, which we still hold to a high standard. But even now, and especially now, after the amount of amendments, the purity of the Constitution is not what it was in Mr. Garvey's time. So this is the last document that we have that is untouched from Mr. Garvey's hands that we have today. What does the Course of African Philosophy represent? What does the Course of African Philosophy represent in the editor's opinion? Anybody know this? I see you, late President.
His will and testament.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna go to the text on that one because that's so important. People don't.
I answer because I'm about to head out. I'm gonna catch this one.
Thank you, Brother Eric.
Most definitely.
Do I not have the introduction? Old and New Testament, Old and New Testament. All right, I ain't got time. I have to pull that up later. But it's written in the text. This represents Mr. Garvey's last political will and testament. The years of Garvey's birth and death, August 17th, 1887 to June 10th, 1940. What years was Garvey in the United States? Throughout his 52 years on Earth, he was only in the United States from March 1916 to November or December 1927, but 11 years in the United States. And most of what we know in regards to his history, his greatness, his legacy comes from that short 11 years in the United States. And of those 11 years, over 2 years, he was incarcerated. So even a much shorter time in which Mr. Garvey was able to create a major amount of success and a legacy that we're still speaking of 100 years later. When and where was the UNIA founded as an organization? July 20th, 1914. in Kingston, Jamaica. How does the editor describe what the course of African philosophy is? Talk about it as this is Mr. Garvey looking at things from in hindsight. So this is Mr. Garvey at the age of 50, confidential conclave, and able to freely express himself. When we talk about the speeches and things, these are sentiments and words that Mr. Garvey gave on a public platform. And anyone has done any type of speaking knows that our public sentiments are different from our private sentiments. So the things that we've gotten from philosophers and speeches may be somewhat different from what we get from Course of African Philosophy. But we are taught through the text that the Course of African Philosophy is Mr. Garvey later in his life, and it says that he learned from the benefit of an unfortunate hindsight. So some of his opinions have changed at this point. Some of the tones have changed, but if someone was to, hypothetically, we live to, be 60 or whatever years old and we end up transitioning, would we prefer for our legacy to be what we did in our 30s or what we did in our 50s and 60s? So that's my approach. This is Mr. Garvey's final opinion, and his evolved opinion. What is the immediate purpose of the course? Course of African Philosophy's immediate purpose was to train up a cadre of UNIA leaders that would carry on the great work after Mr. Garvey's death. That's the purpose of the Course of African Philosophy. What was the requirements to pass the course taught by Garvey? There were two things that we understand, or that the text says. One, each of the lessons had to be written out with our own hand. So if we want full 100%, there's nothing anybody can say to discredit our certification. Write out each of the lessons in your own hand, and no one can tell you that you have not completed the Course of African Philosophy as taught by Marcus Garvey, in my opinion. The second was an examination, and that's what we do in modern time. We do an examination. We don't have the records of the examination that Mr. Garvey gave, but we give a version of an examination. How many lessons and subjects were there total, and the difference in the types of lessons? Somebody want to answer that? We should know that one.
Was 22 written, 20 unwritten, 20 written, 22 unwritten, or 21 written, 21 unwritten, something like that. But somewhere in the 22 written, 22 unwritten.
Yes, over 42 lessons total, where you'll see in some writing, some say 42, some say over 42. That's neither here nor there. It's not. But 22 of the lessons are written and documented in the Course of African Philosophy. The other 20 lessons were committed to memory. Just because you read the book and write out everything doesn't mean that you've gotten the full Course of African Philosophy. Garvey's beliefs about the course. Mr. Garvey felt that this was a rigid course of training. It was how he explained it. He said that his intentions for the course was to instill a fierce Afrocentric perspective. But Mr. Garvey felt that we basically had to clean our minds. A lot of the ideas, a lot of proposals, solutions that we were bringing to the organization were Eurocentric, and that's we've been taught Eurocentric beliefs. We're in a Eurocentric society, so before we try to solve our problems, we can't solve Black problems with a white mind. We have to Africanize our minds, Africanize our proposals, Africanize our programs, and then bring that back to the community. I got a couple passages here. So Matthew 15:14. Brother Mason, if you want to get Luke 23:34. These all should be related to the same thing, though. Of like, let them alone. Let them alone, they be blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. So we're trying to prevent that with this process. We're trying to create leaders of vision, and that's something that the book starts out saying. It says Mr. Garvey was a man of vision, and his students had to be visionaries. So if we're going to be leaders, we have to have vision. Jeremiah 16:19. Sorry, I'm not sharing properly. Like, that ain't what it say. Jeremiah 16:19. O Lord, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. So this is going into the Eurocentric mindset. We have inherited beliefs and ideas that are not beneficial. And our parents have been taught these things. You know, the white Jesuses, the JFK worship. These are things that happened before our time, but these are things that we have inherited, but they're not for our benefit. Brother Masons, do you have the last one? Luke 23:34.
Luke 23:34. Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they are doing. And they divided us his clothes by casting lots.
So another thing that the book, and I think that probably should have went to lesson 1, but Mr. Garvey has a strong, oh no, that was, yeah, what is Garvey's position on the majority of Negroes? Mr. Garvey says in the text, majority of our people are ignorant. And that's what that scripture kind of relates to. Forgive them for they know not what they do. Our people don't even know, what we are doing to ourselves and how we are our own detriment. But Mr. Garvey says that we must approach our people with a level of patience. As it took time to, what, as Mr. Garvey says, Christianize our people. We must have patience as we try to Africanize our people is the best word I can think of. Okay. Second class was taught 1937 was the first 38. There were 7 students that graduated in the second class. What was the original intent of Mr. Garvey's trip to the United States in 1916? Originally, he was coming to speak with Booker T. Washington to investigate how to start an agriculture school in Jamaica, similar to what Brother Booker T. Washington did in Tuskegee. Brother Mason, if you could have 2 Timothy 2:24 ready.
Got it.
When was the School of African Philosophy agreed upon by the UNIA, and what were the circumstances? The original School of African Philosophy was agreed upon in the 1934 convention. So as we read in the beginning, Mr. Garvey was talking about the 4 years prior, and that being the first convention that they were able to have since his deportation. In that 1934 convention, I believe it was 34. Let me double check that. I'll double check, but I think it was the 1934 convention. They agreed.
It says as early as 1934.
Okay. And that time they had agreed upon this school. And again, based on our aims and objectives, we have a priority to establish schools, universities, and academies for the racial education and uplift of our people. So the School of African Philosophy was directly in line with that principle. As I said in the quote, ignorance rules the world, and intelligence rules the world, and ignorance carries the burden. What is 2 Timothy 2:24?
And the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach patience.
Apt to teach patience. Okay. All right. Yeah, that probably should have went with my the patience one as well. But we got to be patient with our people. We have to teach. In order to do that, we have to be taught, and that's what the course of African philosophy is, in Mr. Garvey's opinion. And Mr. Garvey's two quotes to the people in Detroit, 1937. Anybody want to give this?
What he says, I have given them all I know.
Yes.
And I'm trying to make everyone Marcus Garvey personified.
Yes, ma'am. And you can look that speech up. You can just type in. Let me see if I can do it really quick. But that is a popular speech. Well, it's not super popular. Sorry, let me not say that. It should be. 1937 Ontario. It was in the Black Man.
Can I share what I found?
I have it here, but you can. What do you have?
Okay, it says here, in 1937, Marcus Garvey, a prominent Jamaican political leader, publisher, journalist, and orator who was a staunch proponent of Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism, is known for many powerful quotes. Here are two notable quotes attributed to him from that period. A people without a people without the knowledge of their past history,
Like a tree without roots.
origin, and culture is like a tree without roots.
Yes, ma'am.
This quote emphasizes the importance of historical and cultural awareness for the sustenance and growth of any community or individual. And the second one is, up, you mighty race, accomplish what you will. I recall this echo from President John. You mentioned this several times in some of our meetings. Up, you mighty race, accomplish what you will. This rally cry encouraged Black people to rise up, unite, and pursue their goals and ambitions with confidence and determination. These quotes reflect Garvey's enduring messages of self-awareness, empowerment, and collective action for the advancement of Black people globally.
Thank you, Dr. Kuda.
You're welcome.
Do you know the source of those statements? Do you know who said those statements?
It is Garvey himself who said them, but I can get the source.
Okay. Well, what I'm looking for again, I mean, that is correct and accurate. What I'm
The source, I've got, if you want me to give you I've got these quotes highlight Garvey's enduring messages of self-reliance, mental emancipation, and the importance of collective action for progress and empowerment. But you were asking the source where the information is coming from?
Yeah, it sounds like a compilation that someone else compiled of Garvey's quote.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I actually just retrieved it from my generative pre-trained transformer.
Okay.
Mm.
Not a problem. What I was looking for is the actual speech that Mr. Garvey gave.
Okay.
That's what I have here. And this is the speech that the text is speaking in reference to. And it starts here at this third paragraph. We held a conference at Toronto from 21st to 31st. And again, this letter is September 1937. So we got to remember these times. September 25th, 1937. This is 2 days after what we just read was the oath. So 2 days after the graduation of the first class. We held a conference at Toronto from 24th to 31st of August, which was attended by representatives from all sections of the United States. So this would be the 1937 convention. But among them were people who came from Canada and United States to attend the summer school. And that's what we're trying to replicate, which I am teaching here from the 1st to the 31st of September. The purpose was to train UNIA leaders. He says, I have tried to train them and they are being trained well, and they are being well trained. I am proud of them. They will graduate on the 25th. So they took the oath on the 23rd, and this is recorded on the 25th. So something's kind of weird there. They will be sent back to you. I have given, this is the quotes. I have given them all I know. I am trying to make everyone a Marcus Garvey personified. The new leadership of the UNIA shall be by and through men who have been particularly trained. That is the new UNIA. I expect between now and the next convention, we will have at least trained men and women who will represent the UNIA. The course that these people are taking includes 42 subjects, bearing on the scope and the work of the UNIA. Nothing has been left out. It is a course known as African philosophy, the philosophy that is particularly ours. So this is the actual speech that Mr. Garvey gave in 1937 in Ontario, and it says he gave the speech to people of Detroit, but Ontario is kind of in Canada, but it's close enough to where our brothers and sisters from Detroit can be there. But as we know, Mr. Garvey was not allowed to come into the United States. But this is that 1937 speech where Mr. Garvey said those two quotes. But we should understand, Mr. Garvey is trying to create something. He's trying to build something for the future. And that is the course of African philosophy. All right, lesson 1. We got 45 minutes. We got to get through 7 lessons in 45 minutes. This will be a challenge. So first thing we got to understand is Mr. Garvey talks about lesson 1. He titles it Intelligence, Education, Universal Knowledge, and How to Get It. The very first thing that he says, we must never stop learning, never stop reading. So that's the first thing. We should always be reading. Mr. Garvey's view on history. Mr. Garvey said that we should master history or read history incessantly until we master it. But Mr. Garvey felt that history is the foundation of intelligence, education, and universal knowledge, and he says specifically the history of man. Brother Mason, I'm not sure if you utilize the book of Sirach. I don't think it's not in the King James, but from what I understand, it's like
the book of Sirach, no.
Okay, I'll get that one. Sister Cecily. What is that? Sirach 11:8. Don't interrupt someone. All right, yeah, I remember this now. I know where it's going. Don't interrupt someone while speaking. Hear what he has to say before you answer. So that was in the aspect of what subject should we never write or speak about and why. In this lesson, Mr. Garvey says if we don't know about a subject, we should remain silent. But it makes us look bad and we lose I think the word he uses prestige. But just remain silent if it's not our realm of expertise. And that's something that we really kind of need to internalize. It makes our meetings a lot more effective. If we just stick to, if we don't know it, don't speak on it. Basically, you make yourself look bad. You can embarrass yourself real quick. How often should we read and when is the best time? Anybody want to answer that one? How often does Mr. Garvey say that we should read? When is the best time Mr. Garvey recommends for us to read according to the course of African philosophy?
You should read at least 4 hours a day. And he says like the best time to read is in the evening after you retire from work.
Yes.
And after you rested and before the sleeping hours.
Do we remember why it was before sleep?
It says, if you do so before morning, so you could be more it says, but you do so before morning so that during your sleeping hours, what you have read may become subconscious. That is to say, planted in your memory.
Yes. So yes, read 4 hours a day, read before bed. And the intention is that what you read becomes a part of your subconscious. But these are particular lessons on gaining intelligence, education, gaining universal knowledge. What does Garvey say about the company that we keep? We'll talk about this, but Mr. Garvey says that we should be around people that we can learn from. And he also says we should not keep constant company of those that do not know as much as us. But we should be constantly trying to develop and improve and elevate our knowledge and intelligence. In order to do that, we have to be around others that are like-minded, that are trying to elevate themselves, not individuals that are content in their ignorance, for lack of a better term. But our social circles are important. The individuals that we spend our time with, their level of intellect is important in regards to our quest for knowledge. Where's all the knowledge that you want, and how do you find it? All the knowledge that you want is in the world. We must go out and search for it. So Mr. Garvey highly recommends books, texts. He talks specifically about autobiographies, but he said we have a limited life, and we're only a small snapshot of the history of the world. So in order for us to understand what went on before us, we have to rely upon the history of those that came before us. So we got a lot to learn and a lot of time to catch up on as far as history and learning history. What does Garvey say is the value of knowledge? Mr. Garvey says that the value of knowledge is to use it. So we are not to be armchair revolutionaries. We are not to be, just repositories of facts and information just to have it and just to regurgitate it and just to debate. But we are acquiring knowledge to use that knowledge, to put it into action, to improve our conditions and the conditions of our people. But this is not a frivolous, egotistical quest for knowledge and information. This is a practical quest for information. In reading, is it required that we agree with everything that we read, and why? Mr. Garvey says no. We must apply our own rationale and reason to everything that we read, and I will even say that includes this text. If there's some things that we disagree with in this text, some things that have evolved, some things that no longer apply based on the history, Mr. Garvey gives us the right to update that based upon the latest facts. So just because something is written doesn't mean that it's a fact. We must prove that it's a fact through our own logic and reasoning. What should we be doing in our spare time? You should be reading. So we don't have time to play around and twist our fingers. Even if we're at the DMV waiting, we should have a booklet, something to read. But at all times, anytime you have a free moment, we should be reading or learning, listening to speeches, whatever it may be. But we don't waste time. There's no such thing as wasting time. What do the greatest men and women in the world burn? And as Lady President said, we read. Mr. Garvey encourages us to read before we go to bed. To my knowledge, Mr. Garvey didn't get a lot of sleep, but he says that the greatest men and the women burn the midnight lamp. Basically, they stay up late at night. They continue to learn. And while others are sleeping, they are learning. And by the time the morning comes, they have an advantage on their neighbors. And if you do that, week after week, month after month, year after year, it reminds me of Kobe Bryant. He talked about how he would train more than his competitors. But when you compound, his daily additional training compared to others, after 5 years, he would have, an extra, 1,000 hours compared to someone that, that didn't work as hard as he did. But y'all get what I'm saying. Why should we study multiple subjects? Basically, Mr. Garvey says we got to be well-rounded. We got to be well-rounded. In the later lessons, or in this lesson, he says that we shouldn't speak on things that we don't know. But in the later lessons, he says that as a leader, we have an obligation to speak. And when we're given that opportunity, we should have something to say. So even if the topic of discussion is, insect reproduction on the planet Mars, we should at least have some input, say, based on what I know, that seems to be a very improbable idea, rather than just saying, I don't have any knowledge to that. And sometimes we won't have any knowledge, and that's what you got to do. But that is not the goal. And for us, so we focus on the goal, and based on the goal is to be well-rounded. In order to meet that goal, we have a plan of studying multiple subjects. Why should we keep our private library secure? Basically, Mr. Garvey says by the time when you need the book that you want, it won't be there, or somebody will take it. One thing I want students that have taken this prior to consider is the aspect of, could Mr. Garvey in this lesson be making the analogy that the library is our mind, and we have to protect our minds, and we have to build our libraries, which is the information in our minds. But again, that's not for the first year participant. That's, first year, just take it as it is. It's a library. We want to protect our libraries. What book does Mr. Garvey suggest that we read a chapter of every day? Anybody know that one?
The Bible.
The Bible, yes. Mr. Garvey recommends we read a chapter of the Bible every day, Old and New Testament. And that's why you see the scriptures are being thrown in. That's something that I've been trying to incorporate this year, is not only transmitting the information that Mr. Garvey is saying, but actually applying it, so I've been trying to take some time to get into the text. And Sister Cecily, thank you for reminding us of that priority as well. Brother Mason, you wouldn't have Luke 23:26 ready, would you?
Luke 23:26.
Yes. Just take up your cross.
23:26. Check it. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon, a Syrian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus.
Was this thing on this the whole time? Luke 23:26, soldiers led Jesus away, and they were going. They met a man from Cyrene named Simon. I don't like these translations. But this is about Simon the Cyrenian. He carried the cross for Christ. And that goes back to lesson 1, historical sources that show that the black man was important color. Those historical sources, 1, the Bible, and also Mr. Garvey talks about how the Negro has a special claim to the cross through Simon the Cyrenian. And that's what Luke 23:26 details. It was a well-known black man that took up the cross and carried the cross for Christ. And we have that connection, whether people want to say, because Garvey says that Christ wasn't 100% Negro. Mr. Garvey believes that Christ represented all races. So his connection to Christianity was through Simon the Cyrenian and the cross. Jesus. Okay. What historical sources? Okay. Why should we study sociology? I don't really even remember the answer to this, but it has something to do with studying multiple subjects. Sister Ra Ebony, Late President, do you have that available? As far as why we should study sociology, page 16.
It says you must pay great attention to sociology. Get the best books on the subject that you can find and read them thoroughly. Find out the social relationship among other races so that you may know how to advise your people in their social behavior. Never admit that the Negro is more immoral than the white man. Try to prove the contrary. Continue. It says socially, the white man has debauched and debased all other races because of his dominant power. It says he is responsible for more illegitimacy among the races than any other race. He has left bastard children everywhere he has been. Therefore, he is not competent to say that he is socially and morally purer than any other race.
Thank you, Lady President. So understanding sociology and understanding it for our benefit and so that it can't be used against us. But that goes into study of multiple subjects. Everything, Mr. Garvey says that we should have we should look at things from the point of view of the benefit of our race. All right, lesson 2, to lead, talks about leadership. First thing that Mr. Garvey says is in order to lead, you must be superior to your followers, or you must be superior in the things that in the things that people follow you for. But we don't teach this as an arrogant form of superiority. This follows up lesson 1. So I explain this as you must be superior intellectually. And that's only in regards to certain subjects. So if we're, it's only in regards to certain subjects. We always want to be as close to a level of expertise as possible, because when we are not, we have to defer to those that do know. So in order to be a leader and maintain a position of leadership, we must constantly be pursuing and acquiring knowledge at a rate faster than our peers or those that follow us. Why must a leader be concerned with a clean appearance? Basically, leaders are always being, what's the word? It's not analyzed, but criticized. And as you stand on a podium, as you stand in front of a group of people, people are going to, look at your shirt, your hair, your teeth, your shoes. What is the condition of your attire? What is the condition of your posture? What is your fragrance that you give off? All of this stuff is going to be criticized. So we as leadership have a base responsibility to be presentable. We must be clean. We don't necessarily have to have a 3-piece, Armani suit, but the suit that we do have should be clean, should be well kept, and should be well maintained. The shoes that we do have, we only got one pair of shoes. They should be cleaned, polished, and presentable. Our hygiene, we should be clean, brush our teeth, brush your hair, but don't give individuals easy things to criticize as if we are lazy in our hygiene or appearance. So people are always waiting to criticize, and you can't give them these easy criticisms as a leader. What are some characteristics of leadership according to Garvey? So Mr. Garvey gives some characteristics of leadership. Lady President, I may need your help. I know confidence.
He said leaders must be self-possessed, confident, feeling self-reliant.
Okay. So I've got he's got several examples. I've got from pages 19 through 21, but he gives some specific characteristics that we should embody as leaders. I'm gonna need Deuteronomy 11:18. What does Garvey say about your heart and your head? So for this one, Mr. Garvey says our heart and our head have to be in line. If your heart is not in it, it is pure sentiment. If your head is not in it, it's a lie, I think, or it's the other way around. But our mentally, we should be astute to carry out what we want to do, and we should also have the intentions. Our heart should be in line with these desires. So in the past, I've talked about it in regards to willing and able. So your heart is your will, you want to do it. Your mind, your head is you're able to do it. You have the funds, you have the time, you have the resources. Your heart wants to do it. Your heart has the passion to do it. Your head and your heart are now in alignment. Sometimes we have the heart, we have the desire, but we may not have the time, or we may have all of the ideas and all the solutions, but we don't have the heart for it, and those are probably some of the worst people to bring into something like this, because but at any rate, heart and head must be in alignment as leaders. Deuteronomy 11:18, Brother Mason, you have that?
Therefore shall ye lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes.
So Mr. Garvey talks about a relationship, heart, mind, and soul, relates it to a trinity. But we got to be in line. We can't be disingenuous about what it is that we're trying to do, because our audience will pick that up. Why must a leader always have something to say? Mr. Garvey says that a leader must always have something to say. If we don't, we forfeit our leadership to those that do. So we just talked about in lesson 1, don't say anything. If don't talk about things that you don't know. In lesson 2, it says we must always have something to say. So reading between the lines, we should always be reading, we should always be studying, we should always be learning, and there should be very little things, or if there are things, there should be, we should understand what things are important and what things we should have an opinion on. So if somebody's talking about the politics, the economics of the Black race in Atlanta, we should have a billion things to say about that. If someone's talking about the upcoming Olympics, we may not have as much to say about that, but one of those discussions is much more critical to our conditions as a people than the other. So know what's important, study what's important, and make sure that we have a voice on the things that we consider important. When Garvey says that a leader should always make an effort to be known in his community, what people was he referring to? There he's talking about the leaders in the community. Lady President, do you have the list of clergymen, businessmen, lawyers, doctors, governor, mayor, secretary of state, but what I would consider the movers and the shakers. In the past, we've talked about this, and I do agree that as leaders, we should be known by everybody, and that is true. But again, the priority aspect, as leaders, as influential individuals, we have to, well, not have to, but we should understand that the balance of power is not equal in this world, and some individuals have more power and more say so than others. So we have as leaders of our society, we should prioritize our relationships with those individuals, I think is the best way to say it. Okay. 24 minutes. I gotta move. What does Garvey say about the dividing the Negro race by colors? Something we talk about quite a bit, but Mr. Garvey says that's a no-no. That is blasphemous in the UNIA. We do not divide our race by colors. Our intention is to have a standard Negro race, but comprised of all shades, from the lightest of Africans to the darkest of Africans. So we don't do colorism in the UNIA. What is the idea of the UNIA? This question comes up. Sometimes you have that, Lady President.
Yeah, it says the idea of the UNIA is to unite into one race, all the shades of color, and build up a standard race.
Okay. So that's in the colorism aspect of it. The idea of the UNIA is the if we have any is the rainbow of Negro people, the rainbow of African people, is one body. We're not a light-skinned supremacist. We're not dark-skinned supremacists. We are for the benefit of the Negro African race. Unpardonable sin, according to Mr. Garvey, is for a rich Negro to marry a poor white. We don't believe in integration. We believe in the purity of the race, but even more so, we have a disdain for a transference of wealth. So for a rich Negro to marry a poor white, we know that what we've worked for is going back to the Caucasian. How does the Negro man insult his mother, nature, and God? He does that by not marrying or being with a counterpart that looks like him, that is of his race. You're basically saying that your people are not good enough. Your people are not beautiful enough for you to continue your race. Briefly, I also, y'all gonna get some surah as well. Surah 1643. Says, whenever we raise any messenger before you, whenever we raise any messengers before you, they were no other human beings. To them we sent revelation. So ask those who possess knowledge if you do not know. Ask those who possess knowledge if you do not know. So this is in relation to Mr. Charles L. James being taught by Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Garvey said, "You do not know, and I know you don't know because I haven't taught you." So have to humble ourselves to be taught. Ecclesiasticus 11:8. And Ecclesiasticus Ecclesiastes is different. Ecclesiasticus 11:8. Answer not before thou hast heard the cause, neither erupt men in the midst of their talk. So again, that's about not speaking on things that we don't know. But we got 2 ears, so we should listen twice as much as we speak. So we did lessons 1 and 2. Let me see what I got for 3. Did we do 2 Timothy 2 and 15? I think that's study and show thyself approved or something. No. This translation is terrible.
Second Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.
There you go. Thank you, Brother Macy. So I think that is a good scripture as far as what Mr. Garvey's trying to communicate in lesson 1. We have to acquire knowledge. In order to do that, we have to study. And when, again, the value of knowledge is to use it. So we're not just studying to study, but we are studying to show ourselves approved. It's lesson 2. Talked about Cain and Abel. We need to be more able. We need to, it's things that we can do and things that we're able to do. It's like I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I'm not gonna go into that too much. Lesson 3, aims and objects. So we got 18 minutes to get through 5 lessons. What are the aims and objects of the UNIA-ACL? We should know these. Obviously, number 5 has been removed from the original 11, but they are universal confraternity amongst the race. So that's our universal organization. The idea of the UNIA is to bring all shades of our race under one body, universal confraternity. 2, to spirit of pride and love, to promote the spirit of pride and love. God made us perfect, and we should not be ashamed of who we are and how we are made. In fact, we should love who we are and how we are made. We have a responsibility to do that. Reclaim the fallen. Reclaim the fallen. So that is putting, that's a tough one. I mean, it's putting our people back on level ground, so to speak. We're in a fallen state, as some have said, based on our education, our lack of culture, lack of mores and religion. So we have to reclaim our people and raise us back to a standing position. Assist the needy, that's charitable. So anything that our people need, whether it's food, clothing, shelter, education, we have an obligation to assist our people. Help civilize Africa. Mr. Garvey says Africa be the land of our vine and fig tree. It's our home. If we plan to have any headquarters, it will be in Africa. You don't see, French people's headquarters in China or Japanese people headquarters in Korea. Everyone of their own race has their home in their homeland. So we have to rebuild Africa for that purpose. Our headquarters isn't going to be anywhere else. Independent Negro nations and communities. Mr. Garvey talked about this in the text. He's talked about it as, I think he used the word segregation, but basically creating our own communities and societies, a nation within a nation kind of concept. And we must support these independent Negro nations and communities. Ambassadors, so representatives, everywhere our people are, there should be a representative for their protection and representation, to speak to their issues, but also, to speak to their issues and make sure no one is being taken advantage of. Number 8 was a conscientious spiritual worship. We're not a religious group, but we do, we're not a particular religious group, but we do believe in spiritual worship. We do believe in the concept of the Most High. In lesson 5, we'll talk about Mr. Garvey's interpretation of God. But we do have a monotheistic belief system that we try to promote. With the several religions that our people are under, we'll have to figure out one that we can all work under. Schools and education, so that's what we're doing here. We can't expect anyone else to teach our people the right way. I think Mr. Garvey says that the white man's textbooks laud him and outrage the Negro. So we must create our own texts that highlight and show appreciation for our people. But if we don't create our own education system, we can't expect our children to behave or treat each other any better. Global economy, very simple, straightforward. We must have a global economy. Africa provides for everyone in the world. There's enough resources and enough relationships for us to be able to work within our race. And the fact that we have And the fact that we have the diaspora, we have brothers and sisters all throughout the world. We have essentially a global economy, but it hasn't been organized. We're all over the world, but the intention is to bring that together so that we become the primary providers for ourselves. And 11, work for better conditions in all Negro communities. So anything not listed specifically, take care of our elderly, programs for our youth, those type of anything that's for our benefit is number 11. And Sister Cecily, hold on, we can ask questions in just a moment. Where should the funds of UNIA be directed? Who owns the funds? UNIA funds should be directed to the completing of the programs listed in the aims and objects. The funds are supposed to be owned by the race and put into trust so that it can be inherited by future generations. But there's not supposed to be any particular owner of the funds of the organization. It's supposed to be owned by the race. Who should own the funds and property of the organization? Again, it should be owned by the race, and that should be in trust. There should be no individual ownership based on what Mr. Garvey says on page 33. What must the culmination of all the efforts of the UNIA be? Culmination of all of our efforts should be the creation of a sovereign nation on the continent of Africa. So when we talk about one aim, I think that's what that kind of relays. Our final goal, or not final goal, but the vision to get us towards our final state is having a headquarters on the continent of Africa. And that's what all of our efforts are supposed to be working towards is having a sovereign nation on the continent of Africa. What is required for a nation to be free? What is our only protection? I know the answer is government. Lady President, do you have that available? Page 34, no race is free until it has a strong nation of its own system of government, its own order of society. Never give up this idea. Let no one persuade you against it. It is the only protection for your generation and your race. Hold on to the idea of independent government and nation as long as other men have them. So only protection that Mr. Garvey saw was the establishment of a nation and government. What should we do while we are under alien governments? Mr. Garvey says we should abide by, let me say this specifically. It's page 34. Never be satisfied to always live under the government of other people, because you will always be at their mercy. Visualize yourself and your children and your generations unborn. This must not be a license for you to disobey the laws of the kings of other races or rulers of other races. While you live under their control, you must always seek and work for a government absolutely your own, where you and your children will have a chance. While you are under alien governments, get the best out of them as the rights of citizenship, but always have in view doing something to make it possible for your own race to have a nation and government of its own. So get the best out of our citizenship is what Mr. Garvey recommends. But not to, in later lessons, he'll talk about rioting. I don't know if we touch, we'll touch on that next week. Will conditions be better for the Negro race if another race was to gain power globally? Mr. Garvey says no. If the Japanese or if another nation or race was to become the new dominant race, that does not mean that things will be better for the Black people, for our race, for the Negro race. We will be in the same condition. So that is not anything that we should consider a solution or a path to improve our condition. What is the highest expression of independence? High expression of independence is nationhood. So if we are really trying to be independent, if we really claim independence, we should be working towards what we are doing now, self-governance, establishing societies and organizations to where we can govern ourselves. What emblem signifies the existence of a nation? And that emblem is a flag, and our flag is the red, black, and green flag. So that's 3. I'll talk about this briefly. 3 phases of the course. So the course is broken up into 3 phases, from my understanding. Phase 1 is the individual development. It can be personified in a mirror. So the first lessons 1 through 7 can be personified in a mirror. Basically, you're looking at yourself and you're trying to improve yourself, but it's shadow boxing. You are your greatest opponent in lessons 1 through 7. Individual development, knowledge of self, history. Goal is to be good representatives of ourselves and of the race. Understanding of life and death, striving to achieve the highest level of individual divinity. So the very first thing we must do before we go try to help everybody else is improve ourselves, is to refine ourselves, is to develop ourselves. There's a scripture, I missed this one, but Brother Mace, you may know, but don't try to get it's like trying to get something out of a log out of somebody's eye when you got a mote in your eye. But let's focus on ourselves before we try to fix other people. Let's fix ourselves. And that's what lessons 1 through 7 talks about. Amos 3 and 3. Let's see what we got. I see we got 5 minutes. I'm gonna try to get through this. Amos 3 and 3 states, yeah, this was supposed to be towards the beginning. I need my KJV though. I don't like these other translations. KJV, can 2 walk together except they be agreed? So we're talking about organizing, and we're talking about leadership. In order for us to organize, in order for us to lead, we got to be on the same page. And that's, in my opinion, Course of African Philosophy, that's what that is trying to instill. And I believe that was Garvey's strategy to get us on the same page from a leadership standpoint throughout the organization. Everybody be on the same page, and then we can disseminate that information to our local divisions. 2 John 1 and 6. Second John 1 and 6 states, and this love, that we walk after his commandments. This is the commandment that, as ye have heard from the beginning, ye should walk in it. For us, this is in relation to Mr. Garvey's teachings. We are Garveyites. We go out into the community. We communicate that we are Garveyites. We should hold true to the teachings of Mr. Garvey. And this was put on lesson 3, aims. So we should know the aims, and we should be trying to fulfill and exemplify the aims of the UNIA if we are, in fact, Garveyites. That we have our law to follow. Elocution, the pen is mightier than the sword, but the tongue is mightier than them both put together. So elocution. What does elocution mean? Mr. Garvey says that elocution means to speak out. But he says if you have a story to tell it well. But elocution means to speak out, to communicate, to relay information or a message. Matthew chapter 7 and 6 says, give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. This is just something for us to consider. Audience is important. We got to be clear on the audience that we're speaking to. and what information we are trying to impart on that audience. What does it take to be a good elocutionist? Mr. Garvey says, he says straightforward there, like I think he says strong teeth, but we must be good speakers, strong teeth. He also talks about our lungs as well and having clear passageways and using eucalyptus to keep our passageways clear, but that's important as well. Let's see what I got here. Oh shoot. Yeah, they're not going. I try to put a surah in the Bible. That's not gonna work. Surah 1682, but if they turn away, then your duty, O Prophet, is only to deliver the message clearly. So again, we're talking about elocution. Not everybody's going to grasp the message. Not everybody's going to internalize the message, but our job is to give the message clearly. Why must we speak so that everyone can hear the message? That's exactly what, our job is to relay information. If people can't hear you, there's no information being relayed. What happens when we are honest in what we are saying? Mr. Garvey says that you express it with your whole body. But when we think about good speakers, good orators, Mr. Garvey also talks about not being stagnant and sitting in one place, but being dynamic, moving around. It's a show. It's a performance. It's almost like a concert, so to speak. But you got to move. You have to engage. You have to show excitement, show passion about what it is that you're speaking on, and people will know. Well, not know, but that'll help people to believe that you're connected to what you're saying. I'm probably gonna need about 10, 15 minutes to go over. If you have to go, I understand. What happens? That's what happens when you're honest. What does Garvey say about eye contact? So Mr. Garvey says, as speakers, we should maintain eye contact, but you should not. Yeah, if you don't maintain eye contact, people know you're lying. So inability to maintain eye contact is a show of lack of confidence, a lack of belief in what you're saying. But if you do believe in what you're saying, Mr. Garvey says that you can hold any man's stare. Scripturally, Proverbs 28:1, the wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion. So when you're up there speaking, you have to be bold. You have to stand true and stand strong on what you believe and what you are promoting. But yeah, that goes back to having your head and your heart in line. That's eye contact. When should we ask for a collection? So when should we ask for money? Mr. Garvey says he says two different things. Because I know one time he says immediately after the most emphatic part of the speech. But I think he says something different here on page 41. If you made a good speech before up to the end, then they will listen to you, even making a good speech about collection. If the speech was no good, you will have no good collection. Don't let people believe that your efforts were just to get a collection. Speak forcefully. Continue the same way. This is your climax. Always sit down with emphasis after you have made your speech. So you make your speech, you make your climax, sit down with emphasis after you made your speech, then rise again to do anything else if you have more to do. Don't let the people believe that all your efforts was just to make a collection. So you allow the speech to sit, but you're not immediately asking for money. If you lift the collection at the same time you make the speech, they will think so. Lift the collection immediately after the speech if you made a good speech. So Mr. Garvey says, ask for collection immediately after speech. And that's the same thing he says later on. He just uses the word, the most emphatic part of the speech. But we're not to give the impression that we're just asking for money. To be able to make a speech for 1 or 2 hours, what must we treat and we train? Mr. Garvey uses the word constitution. He says we must treat and train our constitution. Our constitution is basically the entire system of your body. But what that really breaks down to is, make sure you don't have to go to the bathroom. Make sure your stomach isn't hurt, your head isn't hurt, you're well hydrated, but not too hydrated. You have water if your mouth gets dry, but being conscious of your entire body, the movement of your diaphragm, as you speak, the expansion of your lungs. But yeah, you have to control or be conscious of your body, your entire body, to be able to make a speech for 1 to 2 hours. What is the most serious part of your body to be affected in regards to making long speeches? Mr. Garvey says your chest is the most serious part to be affected. So in order to make strong speeches, you want to have a strong chest. What does Garvey recommend that we eat to prevent being exhausted in attempts to making a long speech? Mr. Garvey says that we should eat eggs. We should eat them soft-boiled or raw if possible. The sentiment there is high protein. So we want to have a high protein diet. If you don't eat eggs or if you don't eat raw eggs or whatever, that's fine. We just want to have a high protein diet. Okay, I'm gonna save this. Well, let me see if there's anything critical here. I'm gonna just breeze through this and go to lesson 5. And just in addition to consuming eggs, we want to make sure we have some water. You sip the water, you don't guzzle the water. Obviously, you don't want to make yourself have to use the bathroom. You just want to moisten your palate to speak. Why do most preachers, especially Anglican preachers, fail? Most preachers fail because their congregations can't hear them. So we have to speak loud enough to where everyone can hear us. What should we always try to avoid? It can be ruinous to a speaker. It's a cold. So that's a health nugget that Mr. Garvey's throwing out. But we must maintain our health in order to be a good speaker. You catch a cold, you're not making those speeches. What does Garvey recommend to keep our nostrils clear? I mentioned that eucalyptus. As Garvey say about the places to practice speaking, he says that we should practice in private, in isolation, but not to where we would feel embarrassed, basically, but just in a space where you're comfortable to run through your routine. Why should we not be afraid of our audience? Shouldn't be afraid of your audience because you are the expert. Again, we just went through lessons 1 and 2. Once, to get through lesson 1, if we feel that we've mastered lesson 1, we have not only a repository of good information, but we have a system of maintaining and continuing to acquire information. So what does that mean? That means that not only have we read books and texts, but we have a schedule to where we are reading and consuming information throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the months. Latest time of night that we should be called to speak. Mr. Garvey says that we should not be called any later than 9. I believe it's 9 or 9:30. But you don't want to be called too late because people are tired. Garvey relates tiredness to hungry. If people are tired or hungry, if they have other physical things to worry about, they're not sitting there listening to no speech. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm hungry. I'm not here to listen to what you're saying. So don't, stand up to speak after 9:30, because people want to go home. What is one thing the audience will remember? If nothing else, they will remember your mistakes and your failures. Just like waiting to criticize with your appearance, they're waiting to criticize with your speech as well. And that's why Mr. Garvey in lesson 1 talks about the importance of mastering the language that we speak. We must have a mastery of grammar. And when we get through the longer course, we'll talk about that as well, but that was skipped. I took that out for this presentation. When we're speaking, what should we always try to hold? You should always try to hold their attention, I believe. And what should you never give? You should never give vulgar jokes. But you should always try to hold the attention of your audience. To be a good speaker or elocutionist is to hold what among men? And what does it give you? It gives you a natural lead, and it's to hold a grand prize among men. But yeah. And we just read leadership, and we're following up leadership with elocution. But Mr. Garvey is basically telling you, in order to be a good leader, you should be a good speaker. We have to give opinions on certain aspects. We have to represent our people, and when we do that through elocution, we want to make sure we're doing that well. We want to make sure we're speaking well. We're speaking to be heard. We're speaking clearly. But when we do that, Mr. Garvey says it gives you a natural lead. Lesson 5. What is God? Mr. Garvey, this lesson 5 is titled God, but it's really about, I would say, death, kind of, and our connection to eternity is the way that I look at it. Mr. Garvey explains God as universal intelligence. We can agree, we can disagree, but we just need to understand Mr. Garvey's standpoint. How does man's intelligence compare to God's intelligence? Mr. Garvey says that while the God is universally intelligent, man has a unitary intelligence. So
That's why you got to tap in, right?
yes. But it's also a observation of limitation, so to speak. There's no way, as we talked about, the world has been in existence for thousands of years, to our knowledge, some millions of years. We will only be here for 80, 90 years of that time. So there's no way we can encompass all of the intelligence that has ever been in the world. We have a small piece of that intelligence, and we contribute to it, but we should understand the comparison, and we are basically nothing compared to the greatness and the greatness of universal intelligence. What does Garvey say is it called when man questions God from his limited unitary intelligence? The word that Garvey used, presumptuous. But yeah, who are we to question God? Basically, we have limited intelligence. God has universal intelligence. We may not understand, we may not understand what's going on, or when we lose loved ones, we don't understand it. But God is in control. God has universal intelligence. So it's not for us to question or condemn God or curse God because it's something that we don't understand. What is the average number of years that men live before they die? That's a trick question. Mr. Garvey says that men and women never die. We change form, but we don't die. Why should we not fear death? Mr. Garvey says we shouldn't fear death because it's a part of life. Others have come before us. Others have gone through this path. They have died, and they have died so that we can live. And we will have to do the same thing for the next generation. Mr. Garvey talks about something about eating of ourselves, but in order for the future to be nourished, the past must basically be broken down so that the future can be nourished by the past. But it's a continuous process. Others had to transition for us to be here. So we must understand, in order for the next generation to come, we will have to transition. So we should not fear that. It's a natural process. We're not getting away from it. Why does Garvey say that death is fair and we should not weep? Wait, I think that was the one I just answered. Death is fair because we all go through it. Why should we not fear death? I'm not sure about that one. We'll come back to that. Brief slide. This is about ideology. As again, the introduction said that Mr. Garvey's purpose was to instill a fierce Afrocentric ideology, African-centered ideology. When you look at the world today, the three dominant ideologies is African-centered, European-centered, or Asian-centered. When you look at United States education system, it's primarily European-centered. So we have to come together and create an ideology here in the United States that promotes the African-centered ideology. But at the end of the day, this is the race that has gone on since the beginning of time, and I use that word intentionally, between these cultures, European-centered, African-centered, or Asian-centered. And when you look at the United States and South America, North and South America, they don't have their own ideology. They exhibit either European, Asian, or African ideology. Couple slides, and then we'll open up for questions. Luke 17:20 through 25 says, I'll share. And when he demanded of the Pharisees when the kingdom of God should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of God cometh not with observation, neither shall they say, lo here, lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. And he said unto the disciples, these days will come when ye shall desire to see one of those sons of man, and ye shall not see it. And they said to you, see here or see there, go not after them, nor follow them. For as the lightning that lighteth out of the one part of the heaven shineth unto the other part of the heaven, so shall the Son of Man be. But first he must suffer many things and be rejected of his generation. I think this was so this was about responsibility to us as officers, basically accepting the criticism that comes with leadership. What Mr. Charles L. James said in the text in regards to who this course belongs to. This course is ours. It is whatever is written, distorted, or injected by unauthorized persons using devices other than the proper way that was given to us by the founder and applying the benefits to their own personal benefit. Please understand that, quote, there's a destiny that makes us brothers. None goes his way alone. All that we send into the lives of others comes back to our own. When we say one destiny, this is what I get. All our destiny is tied together. So either we will succeed as a race and be prosperous as a race, or we will fail as a race and be subservient as a race. But it's one destiny. All for one, one for all. Let me get lesson 6 and lesson 7. What was Christ's special mission? Christ was meant to be an example, according to Mr. Garvey, an example of our potential. Hebrews 6:1, therefore leaving the principles of the doctrine of Christ, let us go unto perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from the dead works and faith toward God. Perfection. Mr. Garvey uses that word a couple times in this lesson. He says that Christ's life was meant to be an example of perfection, basically. So our highest ideal or potential. Matthew 10:38 states, and he taketh not his cross and followeth after me, and he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. So again, it's about using Christ as an example. Why does Garvey say that there is no cause to doubt that Christ lived? The answer to that is Christ lived before our time. And he said, you don't have to see a thing to believe it. It's like doubting that your grandfather lived, or I would say great grandfather, 6 times grandfather. You may not have seen him, but you know he existed because your grandfather existed, your father existed, and you exist. So let's not argue about things that happened before our time. So John 17:20-21, neither I pray for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word. They all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. So um, part of Christ's message is unity, being one not only with Christ but with the Creator. I got a little bit of Quran. Surah 16:22, your God is only one God, and for those who do not believe in the hereafter, their hearts are in denial and they are too proud. Is this what I really had? 16:22? That don't seem right. I don't know where I was going with that one. Don't worry about that. What does the New Testament describe? How does the New Testament describe the life of Christ? And again, Mr. Garvey says either perfect or exemplary. But he teaches that you don't have to believe Christ, but it can still be used as a template or an example, and example of our potential. If we did everything right, if we did everything according to the Holy Spirit, we didn't get to the Holy Spirit yet. No, we didn't. We do everything according to the Holy Ghost, which is explained in the next slide. This is how we raise our spiritual level. So lesson 1 talked about our raising our intellectual level. Lesson 6 is talking about raising our spiritual level. What was the greatest thing that Christ taught? Greatest thing that Christ taught was love. What is the race? What race does Garvey say that Christ belonged to? So this is where Garvey say that he believes that Christ did not belong to a particular race. He said that Christ had the blood of all nations, but you can trace his lineage through his father Joseph. Well, at least the Bible does. But what is the difference between the Spirit of God and the free will soul that is in man? Mr. Garvey talks about the Spirit of God as always being right, always guiding us down the right path, but God also gave us a free will, and we can disagree with the path that the Holy Spirit directs us down. So Holy Spirit is always directing us down the path of right. Free will can either choose to go down the path of right or can choose a different path, but that is it's the conflict in man. How does man become sinful? And it is by going against that which we are instructed to do, basically. 2 Thessalonians 2:10 states, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of truth, that they might be saved, with all deceivableness of unrighteousness. So by pursuing unrighteousness, we will perish because we have not received love, the truth, that we might be saved. But pursuing that which we know is not right and not good, is how we become sinful. What was the mission of Christ? Was to show man his potential, that he can be raised back to be eye to eye with God. Not that he can be a God, but he can be eye to eye with God. What is the life of Christ intended to show man? And I think these two are the same thing. Intended to show man our potential, or what we can do. I'm gonna skip these and just go to the last lesson. Lesson 7 is titled Character. So this is building up. So lesson 6 would probably be our ideal, target of what we're trying to do. Lesson 7 is the basic fundamentals. If we can't hit 6, well, we should be striving to meet the example, but the very fundamental stuff, we have to be within the bounds of good character at the very least. We cannot be outside of that. Good character means the behavior that meets the moral precepts of a society, but good character is determined by the society in which we live in. Revelation 3:3 states, remember, therefore, how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. If thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. What was I trying to communicate there? That's maintaining good character. That probably could have went on the previous lesson, but it's about maintaining good character, staying within the bounds of what is perceived as good character. Proverbs 6. These 6 doth the Lord hate, 7 are an abomination: a proud look, lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. So these are fundamental characteristics of principles of character as well. And heart that deceiveth, that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. So we want to maintain good character. We want to stay away from, poor characteristics. Who defines the standard for good character? It's the society. When we don't live up to those standards, I forgot the answer. Lady President, if you know the answer to that, it's like you're outcast from the society, I believe. Greatest prop to character and the best policy is honesty. So, yeah, that's the very fundamental. Why must we never borrow unless we intend to pay it back? Because you build bad credit. Your reputation becomes that of a liar. You become dishonest. You become that person that borrowed money, said they would pay it back, but you didn't pay it back. Why is it a good policy to keep a good and honorable name? Mr. Garvey says that a good and honorable name is like good credit. You'll make a payment and people will accept the payment without even counting it, because of your good credit and your good name. What should you do if you have to be immoral because your nature is weak? So Mr. Garvey talks about that. He says, if you do have to be immoral, we have to hide it. As leaders, we have to make sure we protect our reputation. So if we are, unfortunately in that position where we have to be immoral, that should definitely be something that is maintained. Secrecy is maintained because it should not get out into the public, and it should not be something that we have to do often. How do we not become immoral, and what does immorality lead to? An immoral person cannot find good company because no good person wants to take a chance with immorality. Those who cater to your immorality must be people who have no character, nothing to lose. They must be sick, diseased, or themselves, and don't care. If you read good books and think loftily, you will not be immoral. If you are intelligent, you will not be immoral, because immorality leads to disease, pain, suffering, and ultimately to premature death. So how do we not become immoral? we master lesson 1. We become intelligent. Why is it that an immoral person cannot find good company? We read that nobody wants to be around an immoral person or risk being a victim of their immorality. And we are wrapping up. John 8:23, and he said unto them, we are from beneath. I am from above. Ye are of the world. I am not of this world. So we got to be better than our peers. Yeah, we have to, when we're setting an example, you automatically assume a position of leadership, because if you're setting an example to do something better, that means that you've identified that the group or the society or the nation can be better, and you want to set that example. So instead of, teaching, just addition in second grade, you say, hey, why don't we teach addition, subtraction, and multiplication? And you have to kind of set that example until that becomes the norm. But it should be natural to understand that we are trying to push our society, our nation, our group into what we believe is a better condition. In order to do that, we will have to set an example for them. And I'll stop there. It is almost 5:30. So again, this was just lessons 1 through 7. Intelligence, leadership, aims and objects, elocution, God, Christ, character. Went through this in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, in 7 lessons and the introduction. Typically, as I said, this is a lot of information. I think I did a decent job of relaying the information, but one thing we should understand is normally we only do 1 lesson per week. So we just did 7 lessons in 2 hours. When September comes around, we will do 1 lesson a week. So it allow us to go into much greater depth into each of the lessons, and hopefully a much greater understanding. But the key thing that I try to do is, as I've said before, is just transmit the information. What did Mr. Garvey say? And what is my understanding of what that means today? Any questions, comments, or concerns before we close? And thank you for your patience.
Thank you, President John. I really enjoyed the session. It was really informative. I wish I was taking notes, but at the same time, yeah, I did try to use my library though. And what I liked most is about the headquarters. Do we have currently a headquarters in Africa?
No, no, not officially. We have, well, um, our President General has land in Liberia, and he has a farm in Liberia. If there was any type of headquarters or base of operations for the UNIA on Africa, it would be President General's farm in Liberia. That relationship has become a little bit stagnant as of recently. The President General's sister was married to the president of Liberia. He recently lost the previous election. And since he lost that election, I'm not sure of what our political relationship with Liberia is.
Thank you very much. Then the second, it's not a question, but it's just a comment that I liked the part where Mr. Garvey tells us not to speak if you don't know the subject. Be a good listener instead, because you make a fool out of yourself if you entertain. So those are some of the takeaways. There's a couple of takeaways, and I'm so glad that I stepped in for this session and you explained things so clearly and you read through the information and gave the answers, at the same time. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. My pleasure. But yeah, lesson one is where you're talking about. And yeah, Mr. Garvey explicitly says, if it's not our realm of expertise, we should remain silent and allow the experts to work through the issues. But when we, jump into discussions that we shouldn't be in, one, we embarrass ourselves, and two, we delay the progress of resolution because we're asking questions when we're trying to get understanding instead of just allowing those that already understand to resolve their issue. But thank you, Dr. Kuda. Any other questions? It's 5:32. We got
Just one last thing, please, President John, if I may.
yes.
Is that okay? I like also the part of the race issue because at first I didn't quite understand how to support that issue, the fact that if you're marrying a race that's either than yours, I like the way he explains that if you marry someone lesser, the way you explained it, could you please repeat that? I like that because now it puts me in a better position of, like, for instance, I have family that from Zimbabwe maybe married to a German, and how to communicate with these things, putting this information across. But now the point I think I like most is that it's like you seeing your own race as less, or you are giving back your, like, for instance, for the wealthy. That's the part I like. It was mainly surrounding around a wealthy African marrying a poor Caucasian, something like that.
Yes. So I don't know exactly what lesson this is, but in lesson two, Mr. Garvey has a section specifically on racial purity. So we do want to separate ourselves from other races and other cultures, specifically to maintain the purity of our race. That's one aspect. Mr. Garvey, so obviously in on a base level, we do not agree with interracial marriage, interracial dating, and interracial couples. But Mr. Garvey takes that a step above when he mentions an unpardonable sin. So he says, for a rich Negro to marry a poor white is an unpardonable sin because it simply means the transference of wealth of the race to another and the ultimate loss of that wealth to the race. It is logically evident that if the Negro is rich, he gained all or most of his wealth from his race. Therefore, to ignore the opposite sex of his race and intermarry with another race is to commit a crime or a sin which he should never be pardoned by his race. But it is a transference of wealth. We worked all this time and did all this effort to acquire wealth, and the first thing we do is transfer it back to white people.
Precisely. Thank you. That's what I was
Yes.
alluding to, this point. Thank you so much for reading it over. Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you. Like I said, we got an hour and a half until orientation. I do, this went a little bit long. Thank you for your patience. I will try to be a little bit more concise next week, but part of it is, in the introduction, and students should understand, we go over that first part several times. And we've even gone over the UNIA papers a couple times, but before we get into the course, I really want people to understand what was the history of the course, what was the background of the course, and why is this course so important. This is not something that, Brother John, President John, or Division 421 created. This is something that Mr. Garvey left, and we just happen to be the division that is picking it up and putting it on the forefront, and making sure that this information is not lost. But we feel that, we have an obligation and a responsibility to make sure this information continues. But also, as I said, understand not only the information, but why the information is important. So it's 5:37. If there are any other questions, we will close out and we will reconvene next week.
Thanks for the lesson.
Thank you.
I like going through it at this pace. Like, I'm a fast learner and I'm ADHD, so this just works for me. Thank you.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Sister Cecily. But we do need to. This pace is not conducive to the depth that we will need as this lessons taught and as the scripture says. This has to be written upon our minds and upon our hearts. So we have to go through it, at a pace that it can be internalized. And we may even have to go through it, more than one time so that it can be internalized. I've been going through this since 2018, but almost every year for the past 3 years, 21, 22, or 22, 23, 24, we've had a 6-month course. And now this year, we're introducing this summer portion of the course. But I will say it takes a level of repetition to get it where I would say Mr. Garvey wants us to have it. But thank you, Sister Cecily. But I do look forward to the 6-month portion. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and close out. My phone done died. I was streaming on Facebook. I'll take care of the motto and the slogan for today. If you would, please come off mute, put your black fist in the air, repeat after me. One God.
One God.
One aim.
One aim,
One aim,
And one destiny.
one
One
destiny.
one destiny.
Africa.
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 For the Africans.
For the
For
The
African.
African.
Those at home.
Those at home.
And those abroad.
Those abroad.
Thanks, first family. I get some rest.
But first.
Race first.
Thank you.